Welcome one and all to Let's Play Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, and it's been quite some time since we've last delved into the Metroid series. I wasn't really quite sure how I'd go about this personally because I thought for sure I'd have input lag playing this, but then I went through it again and tried out the Game Boy Advance SP as a controller, and it's not perfect, it's not super ideal, but it was certainly working a lot better for me than using the GameCube controller as is. So, if this setup works well, then I'll stick with it for the rest of the playthrough, and that's why it took so long. Because I was actually debating whether or not I'd come to terms with just getting the Virtual Console version of this on the Wii U, but because Elgato has been giving me a lot of trouble as of late, I decided that I might as well just go back to basics and try something with my composite-based capture card here, since it's done me some good the past several years, you know. Might as well stick with what's not broken, you know. But yeah, Metroid Fusion. So the reason I decided to tackle this today, of all days, is because, well, 16 years ago, I became a Metroid fan thanks to this game. So a lot of you may know that after Super Metroid, there was a big, long 8-year hiatus between this and Super Metroid. And it's thought to be because, well, unlike, you know, the issue with Other M, where it almost fucked Metroid in the long term, Super was more so the opposite case. It was more so the fact that, you know, the N64 controller kind of sucked, and the fact that, well, apparently they couldn't figure out how to follow up with such a masterpiece, you know? Even Nintendo kind of realized that, you know, Super Metroid was such a critical hit, and I agree. Like, go back and watch my Super Metroid analysis to see just how much I praise the game critically, because I think that game has held up amazingly well. And, yeah, because of that, we kind of get a very different entry as a follow-up to said game. So, after Super Metroid, and the fact that we pretty much skipped the 5th generation for Metroid and as a whole, if you're not counting Super Smash Bros. On the N64, that is, they finally decided to come up with a proper sequel to Super Metroid and a sort of semi-reboot kind of game, except not really. So you have this and Metroid Prime, and Metroid Prime I will be tackling sometime after I finish Fusion. I just don't feel like playing it right now because I've got a lot of things that have come up in life that prevent me from recording as I'd please. But yeah, instead of, you know, rebooting the series and or making a sequel that inhabits all of the non-linear gameplay and structure of the previous game, Super Metroid, Sakamoto decided to go all out and make a more narrative-based game, a more story-driven game that is a lot more linear in structure and a lot more barred off, as I'd like to call it. They did not play it safe with Metroid Fusion. Oh no, not at all. This was before, you know, the time when, you know, when series had went into hibernation. People were like, okay, let's play it safe and make a game that inhabits, like, all of the core strengths of the previous games, which is exactly what Samus Returns did. No. This is not what Metroid Fusion does at all. And because of this, Metroid Fusion kind of has this sort of divisive, like, opinion overall. Like, at worst, people think that Fusion is at least a very okay game, because Metroid Fusion at the very least understands what a Metroid game is, you know, explorative-wise, which I'll be getting into as we progress further into Let's Play. But, yeah, a lot of the things as you know it, as far as, like, just kind of going wherever you want, or trying to, like, keep in, you know, further note of areas you need to go back to later and bring power-ups to, and you have all of the freedom to go back to whenever you want as long as you have those power-ups. No, that philosophy is pretty much thrown out of the window. But, you know, 9-year-old me personally didn't mind because I had never played a Metroid game. Honestly, like, I think outside of Smash 64, I don't even really think I truly knew what a Metroid game was. I think maybe I had played, like, a ROM of Super Metroid on my pop's computer, but even I didn't really know what that was at the time because I was so young to kind of comprehend all of it. But yeah, Fusion was, it just kind of looked cool, you know? Samus has this cool new design because based off of what we're seeing in the story here, um, she gets infected by an X because Samus had eradicated all of the Metroids on SR-388. Because as you know, the Space Pirates are gone, the Metroids are gone, so the X-Parasites are free to do whatever they goddamn please. And because of this, because of the way the power suit is sort of integrated into, you know, Samus's whole infrastructure, as I'd like to say, it's not something she can just kind of take off and call it a day. It's something that kind of has to be removed off of her, you know, organically, because it's kind of imbued within her, you know? You can't just take off the suit and be like, oh, well, there goes the thread, I suppose. So, perhaps as a homage to Super Metroid's ending, the baby Metroid comes to the rescue one last time with a vaccine that they somehow gain from Super Metroid. I imagine they probably took it off of Samus's suit whenever, like, she came back from said game and probably used it for other reasons. Other tries to kind of explain how this comes into play, but very poorly, which is why I'm doing my best not to reference that game. Because goddamn, I hate Other M so much. You want to talk about a linear Metroid game that doesn't understand what Metroid is at all? Look no further than Other M. But yeah, let's save that discussion for another time. Let's keep this Let's Play on a positive note. But yeah, you got this cool new design. The box art looked kind of dope. I mean, yeah. Nowadays, you'd probably consider it a bit more simple because it's literally just stock art, you know, just kind of thrown onto the front cover. But at the time, I was like, cool, look at this, like, sci-fi looking, you know, box art and shit. You got this character with this, like, Spider-Man looking suit and this arm cannon. You got these weird alien creatures. Because I was super huge into Star Wars at the time, so I was a big sci-fi nut, you know, at the time of this game's release. And I was like, yeah, let's try this. And, you know, I'm pretty sure I had to have gotten other GBA games too on my 9th birthday, but this game stole my heart and soul. Like, this was a game that even at the time, I saw massive replay value in, and, you know, despite the faults of, you know, the progression not being quite up to par of Zero Mission and Super Metroid, I still found myself coming back to this to understand the story better and kind of, you know, perfect my movement, the blow through the enemies. This game was such a blast for me, man. This for the longest time was my favorite GBA game until I ran into Zero Mission, which kind of slightly edges out on my preference scale. In fact, for some time, my cousin had owned Zero Mission, and we used to do this thing where me and him would swap back and forth Fusion and Zero Mission. Like, he would play my copy of Fusion, I'd play his copy of Zero Mission, and it was just such a great time, man. I don't know what it is, but it felt like just about every major GBA series, you know, that, you know, Nintendo had at least, like, 2 different variants, and me and my cousin would always, like, constantly swap, like, different games out. Like, for example, like, I had Wario Land 4, he had Wario Land 1, me and him would swap the games back and forth to see which one we thought was quote-unquote better. Psst, Wario Land 4 was better. But yeah, simpler times, man. Simpler times. But yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier about this being a more mission-based adventure, you have objectives. But unlike Other M, where you're kept on a singular path and the game pretty much forces you to go on that path the whole way through, the one thing that's keeping this, you know, game, you know, with the Metroid logo intact and all without pissing people off, is that at the very least, it tells you where the objective is, but you're not really told how to get there. You're still kind of, like, expected, you know, to find out how to get there on your own terms, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, this does kind of feel a little bit stiff, but I'll see if I can adapt to this over time. Samus feels so much better to me than in Super Metroid, if I had to be totally honest. I know that's more of a preference, like, slash, you know, subjective thing, because I know a lot of people prefer Super Metroid's movement just simply because of the fact that you can do a lot of different movement exploits. But I've always been the kind of person who's preferred fast and snappy, like, gameplay over floatier based, like, movement, you know? Which is why I prefer Roy over Marth in, you know, Smash Ultimate, for instance. But yeah, Samus, even though she's a little bit floaty, she definitely feels a bit more responsive than usual. The controls feel a lot more tight. I still say I like Zero Mission's snappier movement just a little bit more, though. But Fusion's is pretty close up to par for me. So, yeah, I love how they start the game off in pretty much what appears to be, you know, an abandoned quarantine bay. So, basically what had happened is that for some reason the Galactic Federation decided to take the suit over here for testing, but it's suddenly gone, and we have to figure out what had happened during all of this exactly. And let me remind you guys, the space pirates are no longer present. We don't have Metroids to deal with, so what could be causing the problem this time around? And this is one of the big things that I love about Metroid Fusion, as far as, like, who the actual villain is, and just, like, how all of this ties in together. This is unfortunate news. The specimens brought back by the field team were infected by X parasites. The X can mimic its prey. Any specimen could have obtained it. Before the explosion, a security sensor scanned one. Yo, I won't lie, that image looks so dope. I know it's just simply showing this for, like, you know, for narrative purposes, I guess, but, like, you know, back then, you saw this CGI-ass looking X-Parasite, you were like, oh my god, cool. Look at what the GBA could do. I thought this was something only the PS1 could handle. This is going to be a very nostalgic-based Let's Play. I apologize. Like, I'll do my best to be as objective as I can, because, you know, again, since I've played more Metroid games, this game doesn't quite fall into my top 3 anymore, but it still falls into my top 5 simply because I have such a close attachment to this game. But, yeah, I'll be sure to point out, like, a lot of, Fusion strengths as we go through, you know, the adventure, you know? Because Fusion strengths kind of comes into, you know, different effects that actually play a part on top of, like, things that Super Metroid might have, like, kind of hinted at in some way, shape, or form. Like the horror, the suspense, all that shit. But Fusion practically screams of it, dude. And it's just gonna be a roller coaster from here on out, man. So yeah, now we're back into the main lobby here, and I love how they changed up the music a little bit from kind of silent and derelict to a more uplifting kind of theme, whereas it's just kind of indicative of the fact that, yeah, we know what the threat is. Doesn't seem all too bad. We're in control now. We're a badass. And we can absorb X-Parasites too, so there's nothing to worry about, right? Right? You haven't played Metroid Fusion before, gents. So yeah, we've come into this adventure a lot weaker than usual. Like, we had the long beam, but that's pretty much a granted from every other game after the original Metroid. But we don't even have missiles. We don't even have the morph ball. We're pretty much stripped of everything that our previous power suit had from Super Metroid. And I'm actually kind of glad that they gave a proper explanation to how all of this played out. You know, as opposed to Super Metroid, where Samus just kind of loses her stuff for some apparent reason or another. I don't fucking know. And it's implied that Super Metroid, you know, doesn't happen too much long after, you know, the events of Metroid 2 in the first place anyway, so it's like, what the fuck happened? So yeah, we can absorb X-Parasites, and we can use them as our sources for energy and missiles. You no longer have energy and missile pickups like in the previous game. Whenever you kill an enemy, you're pretty much guaranteed an X-Parasite. And because of this, it's implied that every enemy on board this station isn't so much, you know, a pure creature, but rather an imitation of something the X-Parasite had eaten and copied. So, yeah, the whole kind of spiel with the X-Parasites here is that whatever prey they devour, they can actually take on the form of the said prey and absorb its knowledge. And this is something that's going to be, you know, explained in further detail as we go. The game does such a fantastic job just trying to describe, like, the whole motivations and, like, just pay attention, basically. The further we go, the more we'll understand about the X-Parasites, basically. This whole narrative is more or less about the fact that we're trying to understand what the deal is with these X-Parasites. They're kind of foreign. We've never seen them before, you know? So, Samus here mentions a character by the name of Adam Malkovich, and it's going to be a figurehead that she'll be referring to quite often during the spiel of Metroid Fusion. And I won't lie, I actually kind of like this. It kind of gives Samus kind of like an ulterior motivation for why she's molded into the figure she is today, because she constantly brings her up, or him up rather, for being the kind of conduit he is for just kind of, you know, bringing up Samus into who she is, or who she is. I don't know. I'm like half asleep right now. I didn't get home till 12 o'clock from work last night, damn it. Give me a fucking break. And again, I don't mind the idea of Adam Malkovich. And I say this because, you know, Other M, you know, shows us who Adam Malkovich is and completely shits upon the whole concept altogether. So anywho, we got missiles. And, yeah, something like this is not going to be the first time it happens, by the way. So, we're kind of stuck here. And he's saying right now that this could perhaps be related to the X? Maybe? But hey, luckily for us, our goals happen to be intertwined with this thing, and it doesn't seem to be too far off from where we're at. We just need to figure out another way of getting there, you know? And yeah, this thing doesn't really have a whole lot of confidence in us. It's saying missiles are our only hope. It's just, I don't know, ever since we started this whole thing, it had to shut up about us using missiles to get through the whole game, you know? And indeed, because missiles definitely feel more important here than ever. Some enemies do not get affected by the normal beam whatsoever, and sometimes you're gonna just have to bring out the, you know, the big guns, as they are, to deal some major damage, you know? So here we get to see just how much more mobile Samus is compared to the previous game. I kind of like how they throw in this kind of area to sort of showcase that. So Samus can now climb things. And yeah, despite this being a lot more linear, Fusion as a whole is a lot more action-packed this time around. You're going to be noticing certain sequences like that where you're going to need to make the best use out of your new mobility options to get through certain scenarios. And you can shoot as you're hanging onto these sort of things too. So, in a way, you know, it's still got the core, you know, run and shoot gameplay, but it's adding more, you know, combat capabilities to on top of like what we already have, you know? It's not like they're taking away anything, so to say. And yeah, we have these things back from Super Metroid, so anytime you see these things present, you get a boss nearby, and oh my god, I am not liking this controller too much. Okay, so like the missiles work a little bit differently compared to Super Metroid, whereas if you just press the select button and move over to the cursor, like you can keep the missiles on, but in this game you have to actually hold the R button, and I actually kind of prefer this over the previous method, because now you can kind of just like have more jurisdiction over whether or not you want the missiles on or off, and I kind of like that a lot actually. Another thing too is that energy tanks in this game are way more present than they've ever been. In fact, there are 20 energy tanks in Fusion, the most any Metroid game up until this point has ever had, and that is because Samus takes damage like a motherfucker. If you're coming into this game blind and you're not too great at the combat, Fusion has a significantly bigger like focus on bosses and enemies than, you know, the previous games. And believe you me, some of these bosses can actually kick your fucking ass this time around. And they're not to be taken lightly, unless you actually know how to fight them properly, as I do. Well, to a certain degree anyway. So yeah, this thing here, we're just gonna blow up. And that thing was an Arachnus. Fusion has all sorts of homages to previous Metroid enemies, and the Arachnus in particular was actually a creature from Metroid 2 that had the Morph Ball bombs. If anybody had played that game before, you might know what I'm talking about, but it was a little mini-boss that when he shot like this thing out of the Chozo statue, it was like, oh, surprise, motherfucker! And then you got an Arachnus instead of an item, and then you beat the Arachnus and you got an item, and I was like, oh, wow, cool. Thanks for the suspense game. And, yeah. Anywho, we have the Morph Ball, and that's gonna be kind of the general gist of this adventure. A lot of this whole spiel here, aside from getting the X-Parasites, is us getting back our power suit enhancements and shit. And we're gonna need all of the upgrades we can get to survive this adventure. So anywho, what's up next on the agenda? Well, shit. Oh man, you guys did not. An SR388 simulation? What could possibly go wrong? I love how I can come into this game, you know, after, you know, playing the previous Metroid games, and you get a better understanding of, like, just the whole backstory and lore of the series, you know, more than initially. And, you know, despite what I'm saying here, you know, Fusion doesn't make a bad starting point at all. I mean, I'd say Zero Mission would probably be the better starting point, simply just because, like, you know, it's got a better understanding of the core mechanics of the other Metroid games, you know, better than Fusion does with its more non-linear based structure. But as a whole, if you're wanting to understand, you know, the Metroid games as a whole, try out Fusion, man. Fusion's not a bad starting point at all. Oh, and because we have a Metroid vaccination within us, not only are we affected by hot places, we also are affected by the cold, because as we all know, Metroids are weak to the cold. And I feel like it wasn't really until this game, actually, where the whole, you know, Metroid series narrative and lore really begins to take that into big account, you know? Because it's constantly referenced in most of the games that Metroids are weak to the cold. And in some ways, shapes or form, you know, they try to make a big deal out of it, and how, you know, they try to find a way for the Metroids to kind of overcome it. And oh my god, what is that scary looking figure? And it's got her suit! And she's got super missiles! And she means business, oh no. And we're just gonna sit there and take that nonchalantly, I guess. And the elevator is out. This game's just setting the stage for it all, isn't it? So yeah, as you can tell there, you have 6 main sectors, as opposed to just like going from one area to another. And all of these areas are kind of divided into their own separate sections. And yeah, because of this, like, your progression is a lot more controlled this time around. Like, if they tell you you're going to Sector 2, you're not going back to Sector 1 to go and find, like, other alternative paths. No, you're going to Sector 2, and you're going to fucking do it, damn it. No ums or buts about it. The main elevator leading to the access shaft has been severely damaged. It will be totally unusable for some time, unfortunately. Some unknown agent is at work. Something very powerful, certainly not human. I'll report when I know more. Now listen closely. The X and Sector 1 have invaded the atmospheric stabilizers. They must want to alter the environment to their needs. They're already reproducing. But they're sure acting fast, huh? So now we have our first true objective here. Clear out the atmospheric stabilizers for some apparent reason, and wipe out the X-Parasites in this area. They mean fucking business, and they mean to do it dirty. So, next time on Let's Play Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, we'll go into Sector 1, eradicate the X-Parasites, and figure out what's wrong with the atmospheric stabilizers. So, see you guys then.